A low pewter sky pressed down on the crags of the Bernese Oberland, blotting out the sun and smothering the annual Grand Alpine dog sled race in a hush that felt more funerary than festive. Flags cracked along the starting chute, but even their bright reds and golds seemed muted. Veterinarian Elsa Knox shuffled along the pens, checking paws, foam and eyes, giving each four-legged athlete a final pat before the 270-kilometre run over 3 passes and 2 glaciers. 15 teams shot out in staggered intervals at dawn. By noon, the race radio was already spitting out warnings of sudden wind slabs and needle-blown snow. Like skiing through talcum powder, one marshal reported. Elsa, stationed at Alpine Checkpoint 2, clicked off the crackling handset and glanced up mountain. A strange glossy glare had formed over the tree line, the kind that made depth perception vanish. Checkpoint 2 clung to the edge of a corniced ridge. A wooden hut with a red cross painted across the door served as her veterinary station. Next to it, 2 race officials doled out caloric mush as teams thundered in. One by one, mushers signed the logbook, punched their time card, and barreled back onto the trail. Around 1440, Lucas Rayner's Siberian string crested the ridge, without Lucas. 12 piebald dogs, eyes wild and tongues lolling, skittered into the checkpoint dragging an empty sled tether. The snow hooks dangled uselessly, compass case open and swinging like a broken jaw. The dogs circled twice, then sat in a worried clump, noses darting toward the uphill wind. Elsa's stomach did a slow, icy rotation. "Where's your driver, boys?" she whispered. The lead official, a freckled student named Jörg, sprinted out of the hut. "Rayner due?" he shouted. "Was leading the whole pack at last split," Elsa said. "He should have been on that sled." Jörg thumbed his radio. White noise. The front that had dulled the sky now swallowed the upper pass in hammered grey. Visibility maybe 40 metres, dropping. Elsa knelt, ran practised fingers over each chest, pressed for pulse, scanned for lacerations. No crashes, no tangles. The team looked freshly driven, not escaped. One dog, a black and white bitch named Circe, held a scrap in her jaws. Elsa coaxed it free, the shattered face of Lucas's brass compass, needle bent at a 90-degree angle. Not dropped, crushed. Jörg's cheeks drained of colour. "Get the patrol." "Patrol's 2 valleys away on avalanche standby," Elsa said, sliding the compass shard into her pocket. "Storm's grounding their chopper." She exhaled once, crisp and decisive. "I'll go. You're veterinary staff, not search and rescue. I'm also an ex-biathlon skier who knows this course, and Lucas is out there right now, maybe buried. Pick one of the handlers to stay with the dogs. I'll take a medical kit and a beacon." She didn't bother waiting for permission. Inside the hut, she traded her snow boots for carbon fibre touring skis, threw a bivy bag, hypothermia wraps, intravenous warm saline, and a compact avalanche probe onto her back. She clipped on a transceiver and toggled it to search. The receiver grumbled, static, a faint beep, then nothing. If Lucas's beacon was still transmitting, the mountains were swallowing it. Outside, the wind took on an eerie tonal whistle. Elsa planted her poles, pushed off into the grit of spindrift, and disappeared northward along the ridge the way the dogs had come. 2. The upper switchbacks were already buried in ankle-deep powder that the map insisted had not existed an hour ago. Each gust filled her tracks behind her, erasing any breadcrumb trail should she need to retreat. Elsa kept her weight centered, skis knifing across the slope in a disciplined kick glide, learned over years of field calls to remote farms. The edge of her mind kept replaying Lucas's last checkpoint interview. Always trust the dogs more than the needle, he had joked, tapping the compass. So why had the dogs arrived and the needle was broken? A kilometre on, small disturbances appeared in the immaculate white, canine tracks dimpling, then vanishing, the sled's twin ruts swallowed by wind. She paused, flipped her transceiver to send briefly, and hollered his name. Silence bounced back. The course bent into a narrow couloir known as the V-notch, walled by rock striped with flowing ice. One misplanted ski here and you could auger 40 metres onto a frozen talus field. Exactly the sort of place where a saboteur could lurk unseen. The thought caught her off guard. Saboteur? Racing's unwritten code was as fierce as it was sacred. The dogs came first. Rivalry never threatened life. Yet the shredded compass conjured up images of a deliberate stomp. Maybe Lucas had crashed, rolled, and shattered it himself, trying to gain footing. Yet the dogs were unscathed, no harness scuffs, no frantic tangle. They had been unclipped, calmly, methodically. Halfway through the couloir, Elsa's pole punched through a crust layer and wanged against something harder than stone. She knelt. Buried just beneath the fresh snow was the curved oak handle of an ice axe. She brushed more powder away. Monogrammed on the shaft, LR, the axe's spike was smeared with crimson, dark against the grey light. Blood. Fresh. A wolfish shiver tore up her spine. She stuffed the axe through the side straps of her pack, clicked into her bindings, and accelerated. 3. On the far side of the V-notch, the terrain opened into a bowl scoured by wind, its surface sculpted like dune lines on the moon. Her beacon chirped 1, 2, 3 faint pips, then steadied into a staccato faster than her heartbeat. Elsa ripped the unit off her harness, toggled the sensitivity dial. Distance 23 meters. Direction arrow twitching southwest. "Lucas!" she shouted. The arrow sharpened. 20 meters. 15. 10. At 6 meters, the display blinked red. She stabbed her avalanche probe downward. Crunch. Again. Crunch. Third time. Resistance. Then a yielding thud. She marked the spot with her pack and began digging madly with her collapsible shovel, arms pistoning. 30 centimeters down, she exposed a navy nylon sleeve, limp and unmoving. A glove, then a forearm wedged at an unnatural angle. Snowpack around the body was weirdly fused, as though heat had briefly melted the inner layer, and it had refrozen, a classic coffin sign that suggested Lucas had been alive for some minutes after burial. When she rolled him onto his back, a handful of snow crystals skittered off his beard. His eyes were shut, lashes silvered with frost. A livid bruise marred his left temple. The right shoulder bulged grotesquely beneath the parka, but his chest rose, shallow, hesitant, but undeniably alive. "Hey, Musha," she whispered, voice cracking. "Veterinary cavalry's here." She clicked a chemical heat pack, slid it against the carotid zone of his neck, another under the armpit. She swabbed a vein on the good arm, inserted a warm salina, taped it fast. His skin was waxy, pulse thready. Stage 2 hypothermia bordering on 3. Her transceiver double beeped. Somewhere upslope another signal had toggled to search mode, maybe a marshal dispatched belatedly. She picked up her radio, prayed the ridge would bounce the frequency, and pressed transmit. "Checkpoint 2. This is Elsa Knox. Located Lucas Rayner at Grid Alpine 36. Hypothermic, possible fracture clavicle and TBI. Need stretcher haul or dog team exfil. Over." Static. Then Jörg's distant voice warbling through grain. "Copy. Stretcher 30 minutes out. Weather worsening." She looked at Lucas. 30 minutes was a very long time to gamble on, in an open bowl with wind slicing through damp clothes. Decision made, she stepped into her skis again, anchored the shovel vertically as a marker, and placed fingers on the carotid pulse. Faint but there. She stripped off her own insulated shell, wrapped it around him, then cinched him into the bivvy sack. Next, she anchored a cord to her climbing harness, clipped the other end to his belt loops, and began towing a grotesque human sled. Metre by metre she skied, dragging 70-odd kilos over sastrugi, chanting breath counts to keep from blacking her own vision with effort. The cord cut her hips, her lungs burned. The wind escalated to a banshee howl, whipping ground snow into devils that pelted her face and fused into her lashes. She risked a backward glance. Lucas's head lolled, but the lips had shaded from bluish marble to a faint pink. The warm drip and friction drag were combining to inch him upward on the hypothermia curve. 500 meters later, she intersected the official trail. Orange bamboo wands poked out of drifts like half-eaten pocky sticks. Footfalls approached, 2 silhouettes, one hauling a rescue toboggan. The lead figure resolved into Balthus Crane, the American Musha currently running second in overall time. Balthus halted, eyes widening behind iced goggles. Holy hell, Elsa, what happened? Help hitch him onto that sled, she panted. The second rescuer, an Alpine guard named Frau Amsel, pulled the vacuum mattress off the sled. Together they shimmied Lucas inside and cranked the hand pump until the splint swallowed his torso rigid. Frau Amsel started strapping him down. Elsa noted Balthus's sled parked nearby. Empty harness lines straggled behind it, no dogs. Where are your Malamutes? Left them at checkpoint 2. I volunteered when I heard the call. Yet his breath rate was nearly normal, cheeks barely flushed from exertion, skis and boots immaculate. Not the look of a man who'd hard-charged a kilometre uphill through fresh drifts. Frau Amsel clipped into her bindings. I'll tow him back, she said, voice gentle as snowfall. Go, Elsa said. I'm returning to secure my gear at the burial site. As the sled slid away, Elsa turned on Balthus. You were a full 30 minutes behind Lucas at split 1, she said quietly, heat in her throat. How'd you get ahead to volunteer? He gave a slow shrug. Shortcutted off the ridgeline, risky, but that's racing. He started to pivot, but her med-gloved hand clamped his wrist. She produced the blood-smeared ice axe from her pack. Recognize this? What are you implying? You left Circe's harness buckles unlatched so the team would bolt at the scent of powder. Lucas follows to secure them, you ambush. Compass smashed so he can't reorient. Hit his temple with something, maybe the axe. Bury him shallow, count on the storm to finish the job. Saying it aloud filled her with a vibration halfway between terror and fury. Could a man she'd shared camp soup with stoop to murder for prize money and sponsorship glory? Balthus's jaw flexed. You're out of line, Doc. She scanned his gloves, faint rust marks along the knuckles. Her pulse jacked. Stay where you are, she ordered, reaching for her radio. But Balthus lunged. She ducked. His mittened fist sailed over her shoulder. Elsa pivoted, planted a boot behind his knee, and he spilled into the snow. Years of Muay Thai classes in Zurich had not been a waste after all. He clawed for purchase. Elsa yanked his beacon, switched it to send, and pitched it downslope. He'd be invisible to any rescue searchers now. She slid his ice axe up the back of her own harness where he couldn't grab it. If you follow, I'll tell every marshal. They might shoot you faster than argue in this visibility. Balthus spat a curse but remained crouched, eyes knifing. Elsa snapped into her skis and shoved off, wind vaulting her out of range before adrenaline wore off. 4 Checkpoint 2's lanterns glowed like ember pits in the late storm dusk. Elsa arrived to find medics loading Lucas into a snowcat. Core temp had risen to 33 Celsius. He was mumbling disoriented questions, but squeezing their fingers, promising signs. Jörg pressed a cup of broth into her hand. She realized her own parka was absent, given to Lucas, yet she hardly felt the cold over the raging furnace of her anger. 2 military police in white camo spoke with Frau Amsel beside the dog line. Elsa marched over. "I have evidence regarding an assault on competitor Lucas Rayner." Her voice cracked, and she thrust the axe forward. "Suspect is Balthus Crane." The officers exchanged glances. One took the axe by the strap, studying the dark stain. The other scribbled details. Frau Amsel nodded vigorously. "I saw Crane heading up alone with that same axe. He claimed he'd misplaced a snow hook." "Crane's up near grid 37, Elsa added. "His beacon's off. Approach with caution. He's volatile." They radioed command. Within minutes, a trio of patrolmen prepped snowmobiles, rifles slung in rescue carry. Elsa watched their headlights vanish into the pewter curtain. 5 Lucas stabilized overnight at the medical chalet, core temp edging to 35, consciousness waxing like surprised moonlight. Elsa sat by his bunk, swirling instant cocoa between her palms. Around 004 Zoo, he cracked open an eye. "Dogs, okay?" he rasped. "Feisty as ever," Elsa grinned. Cersei tried to chew through the kennel door. He frowned, eyelid swelling purple. "Remember, gloves on my face, not yours." She leaned forward. "Whose gloves, Lucas?" He licked cracked lips. "Thought I saw Crane, but maybe dreaming. Dream or not, you're safe now." She squeezed his uninjured hand. "Rest." 6. By dawn, the storm broke, revealing an untouched quilt of powder on the peaks and a hard cobalt sky. News spooled across radios. Balthus Crane had been intercepted at dawn, trying to cross the French border on a borrowed skidoo. Officers found a dented avalanche shovel, matching fragments of brass compass glass, and blood-flecked gloves. He was in custody, pending Swiss federal charges of attempted murder. At noon, marshals gathered the mushers and dogs behind the medical chalet. They conferred with Elsa about a route modification that would cut out the hazardous V-notch and still allow the race to finish with ceremonial flair. Mountain Rescue would escort, judges would freeze times to the last official checkpoint. Lucas, arm in sling, insisted on attending. Bundled in blankets on a wheeled gurney, he addressed the cluster of mushers. The skin around his temple had blackened, but his eyes were fierce blue. "Most of us run dogs because we love the impossible," he said hoarsely. "But there's a line none of us should cross. The dogs showed you that yesterday, brought help even when I couldn't. Run this last section for them, not the money." Applause rippled, subdued yet emphatic. A volunteer pushed his gurney back inside. Elsa remained outdoors, letting the bright sun sting her pupils after the claustrophobia of the storm. She felt wrung out, but lighter. Cersei barked from her kennel. Elsa crouched, rubbing the dog's ears. "Good girl, you saved your driver." Cersei gave a canine sneer and licked the inside of Elsa's palm, where the compass shard had cut her skin unnoticed. A tiny bead of blood welled, bright against the cleaned snow. "Yeah," Elsa murmured to the mountains. "Sometimes the trail itself tries to bury us. Lucky for us, loyalty digs harder." 7. The revised leg commenced at first light the following day. Mushers lined up in partial silence. Gravity of the near loss still hung in the air. but so did a fierce camaraderie. Elsa skied beside the convoy for the first few kilometers, just far enough to see Lucas's dogs, led by Circe, allowed to run under the proxy driving of his handler. They set off down the sparkling glacier, string taut, ears swept back against the wind. Sled runners hissed like silk on marble. As the last team rounded the shoulder and slipped from view, Elsa planted her poles, heart easing for the first time in 30 hours. The sun clanged off the peaks, the sky was a polished bell, and the Alps themselves, ancient, indifferent witnesses, stood serene again. Yet she could not shake the image of a broken compass face and what it said about trusting needles over instinct. From now on, she vowed, she would listen to the dogs first, the instruments second, and to her own gut every time. Because out here, on the thin white edges of civilization, it was not the storm or the cold, or even the avalanches that came for you. It was the unseen hand, the hungry silence, the moment you doubted your own sense of direction, and let someone else decide where true north lay. She clicked into her skis, pointed them downhill, and let the brittle air scour the last tremors from her bones. The race would finish by dusk, the flags would clap again, and songs would float above the chalets. But for now the only sound was her breath, the hiss of waxed bases, and the distant devoted cries of sled dogs pulling toward home.